like it's very important to have a solid. It's got that notification. It's important to have a solid worldview or a foundation because people are going to come to you with very serious problems. Like being a human being is very
Yeah.
intense. You have people who are suicidally depressed, people who have been molested, trauma in their past. And if someone's coming to you with that, you need to have a worldview that can overcome that, or you're not going to be too helpful. So it's kind of, I mean, right now my worldview is solidifying. I'm looking into philosophy a lot. I'm this stuff that's come up as well in the shadow that I'm I'm seeing in myself that I'm dealing with, and that value in that is that you can only really coach someone if you've already resolved it yourself. Like when I was 16, I'd read certain books like self-help books and they'd be like, oh, just use positive thought to be successful. And I was thinking, oh, I'll just do that and then make money teaching people that. But it's kind of a cop out because you need to use it on something else first. Like say you get a business and then once you've proven to yourself you can do it, then it's valuable to teach other people because when people talk to you, they're going to pick up on the field basically. Like if I tell you to do something that I'm not doing, you're going to know, even if it's unconscious, because you'll hear in in my in my words the conviction I have. Thinking about tell. But yeah, it's very hard to help people. You can't help someone more. Like if you're not past a certain point, I don't know how helpful you can be in helping someone else
Yeah,
to
for
get past that.
sure.
That's why I've been
Okay.
putting off for
Yeah.
now.
How have you found the more complicated cases? Because I've only done a few free coaching sessions for people so far. And they've just been, relatively stable people. How have you found some of the more complicated cases? And yeah, what have you had to do with them?
Well, I can speak generally because obviously I,
Yeah, you can't give
you know,
specifics. Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, some people I mean, when you talk to someone, you can see their worldview, and some people are just it's like depressing just to hear it. Like there's one call I got off, and the energy afterwards, I was like, oh, for like an hour, it's kind of like a drain on me
Mm.
because I mean that stuff has to come up. So when you hear someone saying how they see the world, and it's going to butt against your worldview, and if your worldview is not strong enough, it can take you down. But yeah, the challenge with that is it's hard to know when because some people have no intention of getting better and they'll just go to therapy because it's like a self-indulgence and they actually don't want to get better. And sometimes when someone does that, you need to be very harsh with them. Like not and harsh in the sense that you tell them what they're doing because if you don't, they're going to keep doing it. Like it would but the problem with that is you need to be very sure when you're doing that because you don't want to do it at the wrong time. And that's the thing about that I found challenging. It's like it's
Mm.
like if I say the bring it come with the wrong context now, like say someone's feeling very upset, and I feel like what they need is someone to basically tell them you're doing it to yourself and you need to stop. Uh, it could devastate people. Some people can't handle that, but it's exactly what's needed. Like one of my favorite uh teachers, Hawkins. I've been watching the lectures. The lectures are really good Q&As because you see how someone in quite a high space deals with people. And sometimes from the world's perspective, it seemed harsh. Like there was one girl who came up to him and she said, uh, my son died about 15 years ago. And like the socially appropriate response is to be like, oh, I'm sorry. But the way he dealt with it, he said, wasn't it time to get over it? And she you could kind of see what was happening on stage. She was juicing it. Like it had been 15 years and she was still bringing it up. And she didn't actually want to give in. She came up on the stage because she wanted everyone to think, oh, look how sad my story is. It's so sad. It's tragic. And she wanted like validation, like from Hawkins himself. She wants this enlightened in her eyes being to validate her suffering. Like, wow, you've really gone through it. And he wasn't having it. He would say, I think at the end of the actually he seemed from the outside, if you didn't know like the context, it would seem harsh. Like he was saying, isn't it time to get over it? He was like yelling at her. And it worked. Like you could see something shift in her. Because in the moment it was harsh. But if he didn't do that, she would have continued that on forever. Like
Yeah,
30 years of being depressed and miserable. Yes, sir.
when most people ask questions or ask for advice, they're usually asking it to reinforce their worldview, to reinforce their opinions,
That's right.
to stay in
Or
their
they're
current
asking it
state.
because they want approval from the teacher. You can if you're next time you're in a class or you're in like a lecture, look at the people asking questions. You see that a lot of them don't actually want to like they don't actually have a question. Like someone will give an entire lecture, say on say eating I don't know, just something generic, eating broccoli every night is good, and someone will come up in the Q&A and they'll be like, oh, so I'm wondering what should I be eating in my diet? Like it's an obvious question. They're just doing it to get the approval of the person speaking. And you can tell you can get really good at telling when someone has a genuine question. And like it's it normally gets a good answer if it's a good person giving the answers they because they can get a sense that the person actually wants to know something. But yeah, that's right. You do
Mm.
see that for sure. And it can be the opposite too. Like I'm getting good at discerning uh it is a responsibility being a coach. Like you don't want to use it. You don't want to have your life be incomplete and use coaching to fix yourself. It should always be about the other person. Like you shouldn't even be factored into it, ideally. And that's actually quite hard to do. Like a lot of therapists get into therapy because they can't fix themselves and they want to fix other people. And I mean that's good. They can you can do a lot of good doing that, but it's not ideal. Like
Yeah,
I really like the Hippocratic Oath, which is that it's back in ancient Greece, the physicians used to say, I swear by at the time it was Zeus, by all their gods, that when I'm helping someone, my only agenda is to fix this patient pretty much. I don't care what I have to do it. I'm not gonna use it to make myself better. I'm not gonna use it to get social status or get money. I mean, you can get paid for it, but the only intention should be to help someone else. That's coming first. And there's nothing wrong with making a bit of money on the side, things like that. But yeah, there's a lot of traps for sure in coaching. Like I've seen very popular. I'm not going to say who it is, but you can see like very popular self-help speakers that are doing speeches in front of crowds, and their life isn't that great. Like they have failing marriages, and they're giving a speech on how to find the perfect relationship. And yeah, so I'm very conscious of not doing that. But at the same time, you're always going to have tragedy in your life. You're not going to have
mm.
a perfect life. So there is going to be that human side. You can't expect to be perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and as far as like projecting your own issues onto the coaching client or anything like that, and that's one thing I resonated with, the Sedona method, which their coaching style is facilitation. So you aren't really telling people what to do. You're facilitating them into release by asking them the releasing questions. You aren't
Right.
hearing about their story. You don't need to know about their story at all. It's not even useful. You just need to know enough to ask the questions like all the releasing questions, but then also trying to work out if it is it coming from like desire for approval, control, oneness, separation, anything like that, and then being able
Yeah,
to
the
guide
ironic
it.
thing is like if you were just doing something simple like that, there are some like PhD, people that have gone to university studying psychology, and you can be more effective than them just by doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure there are some people Actually, the Sedona method, what they do is they have a training program. I've never done it, but they actually get you to release on wanting to change other people because they get their instructors to release like if you're standing in front of the class, what are all their motivations like wanting the class's approval, wanting to control, wanting
Yeah,
people to be
that's
fixed
exactly it. It's
before
called the Sedona
they go up.
method. It's like for the pre-release process, and it's really useful in relationships. So you can. It was originally made for facilitators, but now they've released it for everybody, which is instead of releasing questions to ask, that approval, that separation, that control, all these different wants and desires that we have around people. And so the idea is you do that before a session, and then you do that after a session as well, to clear up any sort of things that have come up, any triggers for you. Now, going to facilitating somebody, because this is the style I've done, which is to take myself out of the equation as much as possible. Don't really need to know about the client's personal issues, but rather speak more generally, more broadly, in order to facilitate them, and then focusing on that sort of energy and the release of that energy. However, as you said before, if, and this is something I've thought about, if you're dealing with a more complicated case, would they need to actually hear something from you, some direct advice, to put it simply, or to answer sort of a very strong or direct question. I feel like that's where, and this is something I'm still exploring, but there needs to be some part of you that has gone through something that can relate to their situation, to provide something that is directed at them rather than something they have to work out. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it can be very useful. I mean, if I was, it's helpful to use the Sedona method, but it should, ideally, it's like one of several tools you use. So it can be good to do psychoanalysis. There's a lot of value in that, like finding out why someone is the way they are. I mean, ultimately, the crux of it is you're finding what it is that they're hanging on to and you're asking them to let it go. But sometimes it could take an hour of talking through their past to bring that off. It might take, like traditional Freudian kind of therapy too. But it's not like you have to do one. It's not like you
You
only
can
do
combine
Sedona
multiple,
or
yeah.
you only,
That's something I realized that
yeah,
Sedona is fantastic, but it's great for me because I already have that analytical side. But for somebody that doesn't have that, or somebody that needs that in a session, um, how or what tools can then be added on to actually help them with that is something I'm thinking about right now. Yeah.
yeah.
My question to you
Well, there's a
is,
lot of,
oh, sorry.
yes, sir.
Yeah, my question to you is, how do you conduct sessions?
Um, it's like the way I view it, it's like I'm kind of poking around. It's very intuitive. Like I can when I'm talking to someone and I focus in on them, I can start to see what's wrong. It's non-verbal. Like underneath the words, there's an energy, and I'll ask them a question, and they'll give an answer, and you normally know when it's the right answer because it's hard to describe. It's intuitive. It's not something I can describe. It's something very clearly happens, and
Yeah.
it's like poking around. Like someone's come in with a wound, and we kind of bring out the telescope and we're looking in. So I'd say, what's bothering you? Why is that? Just generally ask questions. And then once we get to the core of it, because people normally know, um, I haven't found anyone that didn't know what was going on. People will fight because they don't want to admit it, or they'll pretend they don't know, but people always know what the issue is. You get into you just ask until you get to it, and just by knowing it, automatically will start to shift it. Like if you know you're doing something and you see it very clearly, then you're going to stop doing it because you're always going to choose the path that's easiest and the path that has the least suffering involved. Like if we found out that you were, say, stabbing yourself in the shin every day and you were going unconscious and you found out you were doing it, you're going to stop doing it, right? You're not going to keep doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like that. Um, I'll also I'll kind of like use intuition. Like I once we find out what it is, it might come across a book I just read, and I'll suggest they look into that. The 12 steps are really good as a foundation. I use that a lot.
But sorry, the 12
12
step
steps are
method.
you so the 12 steps like Alcoholics Anonymous, the
Yeah.
anonymous groups basically. That's extremely powerful. Like that gets people off heroin addiction. So I don't know of anything more powerful. I mean, Sedona method is part of the 12 steps in a way. It's the same thing you're getting at. Um, so yeah, it's mainly about admitting what it is. It's important to be extremely non-judgmental, um, and convey that to the person because there are some most of the time it's something extremely embarrassing or something very selfish that has to come up. And there's a reason why people don't want to see it because it's
Mm,
not. You'll find that a lot of it is things we're doing to ourselves. We're pretending we're not. It's dark emotions, things that society generally doesn't want to admit to that come up. So that's important too.
yeah,
But
absolutely. How have you
yeah, I just
felt?
see it as art poking around, finding out what it is. And also, I have the conviction that there's nothing that can't be brought up and healed because I've seen it so many times that I think that facilitates it too. Because like a healer, like a psychotherapist, who's like a atheist, left brain person, might not be willing to confront something like the fear of death because they can't really handle that. So it's important to have a spiritual background. So if that's what comes up, and you have a worldview that can integrate that, you can help. Otherwise, the therapist even might be subconsciously reluctant to see it too.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. How did you come up with your coaching framework, or is this something that came naturally to you? Did you
Well, I
discover
got
it,
it
or
from I had a coach, like a Jungian counselor. Um, I did my first session with him when I was 18. He used a method called Radical Truth, and I worked with him. I probably did about 30 sessions with him. I completely, like, very drastically changed my life, my worldview. So by working with him, I kind of, since I've gone through it, I can now do it for other people. Like that really improved my intuition. So that's really where I got it from. It's
right?
hard to say. It's like if your dad teaches you how to ride a bike, and now you can teach someone else how to ride a bike. It's like that.
Yeah, right. Okay. That's really interesting. I'm going to look into radical truth and see if it's something I can incorporate as well. So what's been
It's very intensive. So
yeah. Oh,
you got to
okay.
be prepared if you're going to do that. It's like
And
it's
sessions or
about
for
admitting
yourself?
for yourself. Like your life's going to go if you're really serious about it and you get into that. You're going to have to. There's some things you have to confront. Like the amount of suffering a normal human being has is intense. Like I've
Absolutely.
really, it's way worse than I thought. Even I had my childhood. I didn't even have a bad childhood. Both my parents are together. There was no abuse that went on. We always had food. We always had money. We had cats and pets. We had a nice house I grew up in. Even with that, like my God, some of the suffering that's come up just in the human shadow, like Carl Jung said, the collective unconscious. It's staggering.
I can agree.
It's
Yeah.
astounding.
In the last year, I've become more and more honest to myself and looked at aspects of myself, and I'm like, man, this keeps going. And there were so many things that I thought I was conscious of in my life that I realized I was pretty unconscious of, or I wasn't willing to look there. And as you said, it's about continuing to look there. And the more I look, the more I realize um, aspects of myself that I was afraid to look at. Then I'm able to see that now in other people. So I go through my life and I
It
look
can
at
be
people,
grueling. Yeah.
and I see all these different things that I could not see before, and I'm just a lot more aware of it. And part of it's important to not be judgmental about it either, and not get triggered when you see it in them, because that's a easy first step when you start seeing things in others. You want to try to fix people, or you might get triggered because of their negative energy or whatever you want to call it. Um, but just seeing it in them in a non-judgmental fashion. So now if I go through my life, and it's interesting when you can be very tuned to negative, it's almost like you walk on a street and everything you see is the negative or the suffering in people. But then other times when I've done some meditation and I felt amazing, and I feel very expanded, I can walk in the street and I can see a lot of happiness and a lot of joy in people. So that's something else I've noticed is sometimes you can be attuned or seeking or looking for something and you can start to see it in your reality. Yeah.
Yeah, that's yeah, what you said is that's basically what the spiritual path is about, really. Like you can have a lot of money, you can have a lot of things that on paper are good, but I mean, there are actors who kill themselves. They have, millions of dollars, all the approval you want. Basically, if you're a good-looking male and you're an actor, you get thousands of girls a month approaching you, millions of dollars, and they kill themselves. Why do they do that? Because it doesn't work. You need to get. It's like the only thing that really matters is the spirit. Because for someone to kill themselves, it has to be really bad. Like if you ever get up on a cliff, or you're like looking over a cliff and you have a fear of heights, you see how strong the life instinct to survive is. It's like terror. For someone to walk through that, think how bad it has to get. And the fact that people have everything external and they would do that means it doesn't work. And that it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Like my advice, if there was someone coming to me, I would say, do your best, get a job. If you're an intelligent person, get educated. But you need to sort out the spiritual side. You can't ignore that because your life's going to be suffering if you don't. It's so important to get right. But yeah, like what you said, there was one. I was listening to one AA speaker, and he said before he went into AA, he was sitting on a chair in his living room, and he was just miserable. Like he hated his wife, he hated his job. And then 2 years later, after going through air, he was sitting in the same chair and he couldn't believe how lucky he was. And nothing had changed in those 2 years. He had the same job, the same wife. So it's kind of understated in our society. Like everyone kind of assumes that there's one thing they can get and it's going to fix everything, but it's not the case. Well, it kind of is in the sense that you can evolve spiritually and that will do it for you. But but people don't really like they do it because like, well, what else are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Because it's not something that people know there's a way out of. The way out of it
Something
is the spiritual path.
something I've examined in myself recently is how I can feel bad or I can feel suffering. I can feel agitation, and there's no difference in my external reality. I just might not feel so good one day. Like, for example, right now I'm sick. So today, yesterday, day before I had a day off, and I just didn't feel as good. But it also mean I had a lot of time just to sit there and meditate. And I noticed that nothing had really changed, but I just felt worse. And because of that, I was creating suffering in myself. And then I thought about times where, you just feel better. You feel more energized, you feel more vibrant. And there's nothing external that's creating that. But in our lives, we often attribute it to that external factor of the external benchmark to be feeling good. To once we have that thing, we can allow ourselves to approve of ourselves. Otherwise, we withhold that approval from ourselves, and we don't want to approve of ourselves. Um, because we feel like we need to have something strongly negative to motivate us to move in the direction of the future, which is just a depiction, some future depiction of some future moment where you have something external. And so noticing that, you might start to notice that um, part of you is living in the future or desiring to live in the future because you don't want to live right here, right now. And so going into meditation, because when I first started off, it was just like focus on your breath kind of stuff, right? And then you go into letting go kind of stuff, and it's like focus on beliefs, thoughts, patterns, emotional energies, and then let go of them. In both ways, what's happening is you're letting go of something and you're moving into the present moment. So when you let go of the emotions, you switch back into, sorry, you are cleared from those emotions, and so you naturally start to fall back into the present moment. You're allowing yourself to be here and now, which is sort of the other side of the coin to focusing on your breath, focusing on being mindful and shifting yourself back. Yeah. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Well, that's basically it's the ego versus the self. The more aligned with the ego you are, the more miserable you are, basically. Like I mean Hawkins really pinned it down in his books. He says when you think of where humans came from, the first life was amoebas, and the amoeba gets energy from the environment.
Sorry, the first life
So the
was what?
ego was
Sorry,
an amoeba. So like
amoeba.
the very first bacteria. That's
Oh,
where,
okay.
and then
I wasn't
evolved up
familiar with
to
that.
apes. Well, basically, that's what the ego is. It gets, it wants to get. It's like, what can I get? Like an animal, because it needs energy from the environment to survive. And it's always incomplete. It's never going to be satisfied. And when you're aligned with that, which is most people all the time, you're constantly suffering. And it's not something to be guilty about because in a way, it's kind of set up. Like the default is to be like that. But the downside of that is you're going to be constantly suffering until you die, basically, as long as that's going on. But when that's not going on, you get into the self, the higher self, which is happiness, peace, all that kind of thing. And I mean, when I first heard that, it sounds nice, but when you see it experientially, it's impossible to deny that's what's going on. Like you start to see it, and you're like, that's exactly right. Like if we tell someone that they're gonna reach the self, which is joy and bliss. It's like, yeah, that's a nice concept, but how does that help me? You can experience it. You can start to see it. Once you stop aligning with ego, when you drop the ego, you can do it meditation through Sedona method. I mean, there's a thousand ways to do it, but it starts to become very obvious how devastating the ego is. Like, I don't know if you're familiar. Do you know the map of consciousness, like Hawkins talks about?
Yeah, yeah, I do.
So the bottom of the map of consciousness, the most egoic person you can imagine is a serial killer. Because you think of what a serial killer is, it's like a predator, it's like a lion. It's just pure ego. It goes into the environment, it's seeking prey, and it just kills, it just takes. That's the most ego aligned person there is. So people are aligned to that to different degrees. The more you're aligned to it, the more suffering, the more hellish your life will be.
Hmm.
And on the contrast of that, the less aligned you are to the ego, the more enjoyable life's going to be too. Like the ultimate ideal that humanity can reach of the avatars is Christ, Buddha, and Krishna. They would they were God realized. They were so the self was just destroyed. There was no self for them, no personal self, which is I mean, it's not really comprehensible. So far out of the normal worldview. It's like
Yeah.
people used to go see even Ramana Maharshi, he was up there. He's not, that. People would see him and they would be stunned for days. They couldn't think just encountering him, the same room as him,
Yeah, if you're in
because that
somebody's Buddha field, there's one guy actually.
powerful.
He does satsang online. There's a guy called Vishrant, and if you go in a call with him, because you can join the Zoom call, or you can watch the live stream. Your mind is kind of blank. Your He's got a strong Buddha field, and it even emits over the video, whereby you can see
Yeah,
people in their mind just go on. They go and try to ask him a question, but then they forget the question. So he tells
that's what
people
used
to
to happen to Hawkins. Like
write
people
down
would
his
come up,
questions.
people would come up, they'll light up, and they'll get there, and they'll just be stunned. They'll be like, "Oh, I don't really. I had a question, but I've forgotten it because he it answered the question. Like any question is really, how do I be happy? And when you're standing in front of someone, you get it. Like they're right there. You are that while you're with them. So there's no more
Yeah,
questions needed.
your ego makes it feel like you need to figure something out, but there's nothing to figure out. And often,
Well, there is
when
until
you,
there isn't.
yeah, yeah, and I guess when you're
On
in
one
that
level, there is for sure.
when you're in that energetic presence, you realize, holy shit, I don't need to ask this question. Um, until it comes back again, I guess. But in that moment, your mind is blank. Your mind is
Yeah, but it's like if you had
shocked.
a question, if you're really wondering how do I get money? Like I'd really like money, and you go into a financial advisor, and you're asking him, and you walk in, and they throw like a pool of gold at you. They say this is yours. That question's gone, right? You don't have that question anymore
That's a great analogy. I love
because you
that.
have it.
Yeah, you got it. Full of
The
gold.
problem is when you leave,
Yeah,
it
if you
comes
can't take that
back.
pool of
Like you got
gold
to
with
earn
you,
it.
you know.
Yeah, you have to earn it yourself. But that's really the value of a if you see a genuine teacher, you pick it up from them, and now that's your ideal forever. And whatever it takes, you would do anything to get back there. If it takes 200 years, because that's what's possible for you now. You're going to refuse to settle for anything else. The Buddha said, um, once you've heard of enlightenment, that's basically it. You're done. Like it might take 20 lifetimes of intense suffering, but because now you know there's something else, you're not going to stop until you get it. I mean, you can take your time. You can spend a lifetime being a venture capitalist, scamming people out of money, and forget about it for a while, but you know now on some level. So the end is it's certain basically once you know that.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. One thing I thought about recently, because I've realized that in many ways my mind thinks very negatively rather than positively. And it attaches itself and focuses on the negative aspect. So 5 good things happen to me, 5 bad things happen to me, or maybe even 1 bad thing happens to me, 9 great things happen to me, but I would focus on that 1 bad thing. Now there might be situations where, lots of bad things happen to you and maybe 1 good thing happens, or something you perceive as good at least. Um, Something I've been thinking about recently is to realize or visualize, a small fire. And a fire starts from a spark, right? A little spark, and that spark grows and grows and grows and becomes a flame and then becomes a massive fire. And that visualization helped me realize sometimes when you only have a little spark and you might start criticizing yourself or beating yourself up for only having a spark and expecting to have a fire, expecting to be there, expecting to be, um, you know, in a different place. Realizing that fire starts from that spark and focusing on that spark. And when you focus on that spark, it allows your fire to grow. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it works. It's what you the energy you put in. Like you can view it like when you're seeing a concert and the microphone will screech, like it would be like woo
Yeah.
over the crowd.
Yeah.
What that is the sound from the microphone is getting picked up by the microphone from the speakers. and it goes back and forth and it amplifies and amplifies. It's like a loop that's thrown again and again. So that's really that's the human conundrum. Every second you have a choice. You're always choosing alignment with ego or alignment with self, with higher self. And I mean, the degree you choose ego is the degree of suffering you're gonna have. Like, if you really want to understand the shadow, there's one book uh Jordan Peterson used to recommend it. It's called Panzram. And it talks about someone, like you said, like focusing on the negative to the extreme. So basically, when Panzram was a kid, he was he was put in the most horrific circumstance. Like he was raped, he was abused, he was put in prison, and he decided, I hate life, and I'm going to do as much as I can with every second of my life to make my life as miserable as I possibly can for me and everyone around me. So his whole life was, how can I bring the most suffering into the world in the shortest amount of time I can? Like I think he killed about 40 people. He used to vandalize churches. That's an extreme. That's what the ego is. Like the ego is just selfishness, resentment. And it's strong as well. Like it's the grip of that. It's animalistic. It's the whole animal. It's so powerful. You kind of, in a way, past a certain point, you need the intercession of either a teacher or Hawkins said, if you're below 600, you need a savior. Like you need Buddha or Christ or like a 12 step group because the ego is so tenacious.
Sorry, if you're below
You just can't let
600,
go of it
if
by
you're below
yourself.
600, 600's, was it acceptance or?
600 is a level of enlightenment, like Ramana Maharshi. So he said, anyone,
Sorry, I thought 1,000 was enlightenment, not 600.
well, there's different degrees. Like 600 is on the map of consciousness. It's when most people leave the body. You have the option to leave. That's the level of enlightenment. 1,000 is like perfecting it. That's as high as you can
Ah,
go
okay,
if
okay.
you're a human being. So it's at 600, the identifications, you're not a person anymore.
Right, 600's that
You're just
initial, 600's that initial awakening into non-duality, or in the Theravada map, what they might call
That's right.
as
Yeah.
awakening, but it's not the same as full enlightenment or arahatship, which they would say is the final stage of
Well,
enlightenment.
there's different, like you can perfect it. Yeah. There's different degrees.
Yeah, right. And you're saying um anybody pre-awakening requires like a savior. What do you mean by that?
Well, that's what Hawkins said. Well, you can you can mess up, right? You can like
Yeah.
say you can make a mistake that destroys someone, and you can do it with good intentions. You don't know what you're doing, and like the karma of that, you're gonna have to experience that out. But until you have a savior to intercede, you're basically lost. Like you can't get out of the ego. It's too tenacious. So 12 steps is the way to do it. If you're most people have an aversion to, I mean, rightfully so, to religion because it's probably been mishandled at some point in their life.
Yeah, right. For sure. Going back to that Panzram book. It's in this reading here. This is Carl Panzram, who is a serial
I would
killer in the
say, yeah, go to read it. Just
1920s.
do be careful because it's a brutal book. Like it's the probably the darkest thing you could read.
He killed 23 people, and this is a journal of murder. It says in Google a memoir. So Panzram wrote this
Yeah.
himself
Well, what happened was
in
there was
prison,
one
or
yeah, so there was one guard who one day he asked for a pack of cigarettes and the guard gave him a cigarette. And Panzram basically said, "You're the only person who's ever been nice to me in my entire life."
really?
He started talking to him, and the guard convinced him to write down an autobiography because like that's valuable stuff. Like if you're a psychologist, you want to know like from the words of the serial killer himself, you can understand. So he did that, and it's fully honest. He's not lying. He's saying why he did what he did. It's yeah, it's pretty brutal, but that's what the ego is. That's the most egoic, like just a predator, pure. Like the lion just seeks the prey and just kills it.
Yeah, right. And why do you think, at least in the book, what sort of impression did you get about why he decided to do those things?
Well, it's resentment because he had a brutal life. Like he came in, and his experience of the world was the world is just pure suffering. No one can be trusted. There is no love. Everything's just out to get you. And his motivation was he's like, well, fuck you. If that's what the world is going to be like, then I'm gonna do everything I can. It's like the motivation of the Columbine shooters. It's basically on the deepest level, it's I hate God himself, and I want to destroy everything that God represents because he let this happen to me.
Hmm.
It's I haven't read it, but there's that famous book Paradise Lost by John Milton. He goes really deep into that. I've just heard people talk about it. I haven't actually read it, but
Ah, okay.
it's that like it's like the satanic. The satanic is just the pure hatred of everything that's love. It's what that is. Why would you choose the satanic? Well, it's because you hate God. You want to destroy God. It's like it's normally represented as a snake. It's a symbolism for it. Well, a snake is just like the second your guard's down, it attacks. That's what the satanic is. And if it doesn't attack you now, it's because it knows that if it attacks you later, it's going to get you worse. It's like pure malevolence, pure evil. But yeah, the thing about Panzeram that's astounding is that that option is available to every person. Every person could become him. You can go to a human being. You can go from that extreme to the opposite. Both.
Yeah,
It's
you
kind of
can.
like you like Hawkins said, every second, the conundrum of a human being is every second you're deciding, every second you're bombarded with something. That's also why it's so valuable as well. Because you have every 2 seconds, every split second, you're making a choice. Ego or self or spirit.
Hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, if you're reading Panzer, I'd also recommend read the opposite. So read like an autobiography of a saint as well.
Author,
So you
what?
can
Sorry,
see like this part.
officers. Did you say?
I'd say read an autobiography of a saint or like an enlightened person. So you get both extremes. Like there's Padre Pio's got a really good biography because it shows you the options. Like you can see the lowest of the low and also
So Padre
the highest
Pio,
ideal as well.
as you say.
Yeah, is an autobiography called Padre Pio, a true story.
There's
That's
also a movie that came out apparently with Shia LaBeouf.
oh yeah, it came out recently. Yeah, I haven't seen it. I haven't heard. I've heard it wasn't
Hmm.
that great, but
Yeah, review doesn't look too good.
it's from someone who's seen it. But like that, he's like the antonym to Panzeram. He's like someone who chose only love all the time, like refused all negativity. I think
Yeah.
Hawkins got him in like he was at like high 500, like level
Wow.
of ecstasy, ecstatic love.
Yeah. Something I realized, and this is something it took me quite a while to realize, was I just focused on noticing emotion, noticing thoughts, and just allowing them to be there. But I didn't realize you can redirect thoughts. Like if you don't want to think something, you can actually be like, no, I'm not thinking that, or I'm going to move my thought into a different direction. Um, and I think that's what when now actually reading some Buddhist books, they talk about, having right thought and even controlling your thoughts, which is
Right.
contradictory to the whole notion of being mindful of thoughts, but now realizing actually you can do both. So you can be mindful of
Yeah.
thoughts at the same time. You can change how you want to think. And this got so
Yeah,
bad for me
it's
that
really
like
powerful
last
to do that. Yeah.
last year I was in the stage where I had things in my mind and I could not get them out of my mind. And it was constantly looping, looping, looping. And the more I tried to stop it, the more like it's basically the extreme experience of learning how thoughts can create suffering. And
Right.
something big for me was realizing I can just choose not to think something. You know, I don't have to sit there and exhaust it. I can just choose not to. Um, and that was really interesting to realize that um, yeah, thoughts are illusions that is something that arises, but you can also change what you think and move your mind into different directions as a tool because the mind is a tool to be used for things you want to use it for. Yeah.
You can choose the opposite. So if you have a thought, like a negative thought, like look at your bank account, you think, oh, there's only $50 in there. Well, the opposite is, well, this time next year I can have a lot of money. Like I can get a job, well-paying job, like I don't know what it is, a carpenter or like a plumber, and I could have heaps of money. I could have a nice house. It's not that unattainable. That's possible. So you can do the opposite.
Yeah.
And it is true. What's held in mind tends to come true.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? Because I feel like because I was following a lot of non-dual teachers, you can get into this whole aspect of spiritual bypassing where you
Yeah.
then start to think, oh, well, I have no control over anything anyway. Everything's just happening. Everything's just arising. Everything's just appearing. And then this can become a cop out where you then are like, well, everything's just arising. So there's no control I have over my reality. And I can't really control my thoughts with it, just things which arise. And yeah, from the ultimate perspective, they're not wrong. But then from your limited perspective of where you are right now, having that
Yeah.
set of belief system when you haven't actually realized it from direct experience and you don't understand it like they do, it's just simply like an excuse or something that's
Well, it's
actually
because
holding
it's
you
not
back.
it's not earned yet. Like
Yeah, it's
it's
not
it's
earned. Yeah.
jumping the gun. Yeah. Like that is true. There is a worldview that's true. But if you're not there yet, it's just
Yeah,
yeah, it's bypassing.
exactly. Exactly. And
Like
so,
you see that like people use spirituality to avoid being like a normal person because it is hard. Like getting a job, choosing a career, like finding a partner. Do you want to have kids? Do you want to get a house? Like it's especially nowadays, it's tougher than it was even
yeah,
years ago. So a lot of people they hear about spirituality and they think, oh, that's a convenient way to avoid all that. I'm just going to play a game of make believe and basically pretend that all my problems are solved and make myself better than everyone. And now I don't have to do any of the stuff that I was afraid of doing.
for sure.
That's yeah, people into teachers like Hawkins, Romano Hashi, they can be really guilty of doing that. Uh, like he said, the world is all an illusion. But yeah, but what if I burn down your house? Are you still going to be thinking that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
World is an illusion when I've just crashed your car, towed your car. I don't think so.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can be guilty of that after following many
But I used to do it.
enlightenment
I did it
teachings
when I
and
was about,
things.
when I was about 17. I first read Hawkins, and I used it to make a fake identity where I was better than everyone. Like when I walked in a room, I would think I'm smarter than everyone here. I'm just better than everyone here. And that was kind of broken about a year later. It was devastating to see. I advise not doing that because when you have to face up to what you've done, it's like it's devastating. I only did it for a year. You can only imagine someone who spent decades doing that, how brutal that would be to see that collapse.
Yeah, for sure.
But the
Yeah.
way the way around it is you do everything you would do normally, and you do spirituality on the side. Like I think Michael Singer is a really good model for that. Like he had a job. He was going to university. Like he was a smart guy. He got educated. He got a degree. He would go to work every day. He had a family. But he was also, while he was doing that, he was doing a spiritual path. Like he was reading, Bhagavad Gita, doing meditation or whatever it was for him at the same time. That's really the fast way. Do both at the same time.
Yeah, Angelo from Simply Always Awakes in a similar boat, and he recommends, he's a doctor and he recommends that anybody on this path, when you hit your awakening or whatever, or when you heading towards awakening, don't stop working just because you feel like you're having some crazy experience, see it through. Um,
Right.
Whereas it can be easy when you go through different stages to feel like, oh, I'm just gonna like quit everything in life and uh yeah, it's easy to think
And
that.
also, if like when you find that happening, it's nothing to feel guilty about. It's just what the ego is going to do. That's everyone goes through that until
Yeah.
they don't anymore.
I
The
think
ego is going
something
to latch on and make a new. It's like it becomes a new ego. Like before, it was about getting resources from the world. Now it's about spiritual status. Like how can I be the biggest ego in the room, the most enlightened person? It's just the back door for the ego.
yeah, yeah, yeah. One
There's
thing
one
I've
my oh sorry to interrupt. Uh
You can finish your thought
my
and then I'll
mentor I
finish.
read my mentor who I did Radical Truth with, he said one day he wrote down one of his goals, and his goal he wrote down was, I want to become more enlightened so I can serve God. And he questioned that, and he found that actually what his goal was, I want to become more enlightened so I be a bigger ego and serve me. And like I can see the sneakiness of that. Like the ego is so sneaky. It's
Yeah,
so tenacious.
exactly.
Like there are people in monasteries. I bet you could find someone whose whole goal in the monastery is to prove that it doesn't work. Like that they're just to prove to themselves that it's not there. They're not going to go back and double down on the ego. It's 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 yeah, it's very humbling to see how tenacious it is.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, my thought was, and I forgot it, unfortunately. Oh no, I remember now. It was about like when you get into all stuff and you start to examine like your real intentions for things and your ego and um why you want to do
Brutal to know.
something, the real truth behind
Yeah, it's depressing to find out. Just
but
yeah, be
behind
prepared for that.
what you think. And sometimes it can be depressing, but also at the same time sometimes you don't know. Like I feel like in many cases I look at things and I'm in a space where I'm like, it's just a bit confusing. Like I don't actually know why I think certain ways. And I'm wondering if that's because I need to keep contemplating and go further until I get into certainty, or I need to let go of trying to work out why. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you'll find out because you there's certain stuff you need to know, like your psychological makeup, your psyche is going to have thousands of interweaving motivations. You're going to find out because
Right,
that stuff has to be resolved. You know,
right. I guess when you are in a period of your life where there are things you haven't fully figured out or you don't know, then if you're being congruent with that, you're going to be in a space where you are very uncertain about things. And to be the most honest and authentic version of you, you'll have to be less certain and have less conviction, right?
that's right. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think that's a period.
Have you ever read Plato, Socrates?
No, I actually haven't. No, but I've read
That's
quotes.
all he did. That's all he did. Like you read any of his dialogues, he's just like he just asks why, and he's not doing it to like stump someone. He's doing it because he actually doesn't know. He wants to find out.
Gotcha,
And he was
gotcha.
he's one of the most influential philosophers ever. Like 2,000 years ago, people still talking about him.
At the same time,
That's
to be
that's like
practical
radical humility.
for sure. At the same time, to be practical in one life, people respect certainty. People respect people that can come from a place of authority or know something or have a way of speaking that conveys certainty. And so many people try to fake it, even though they're not certain. They use the ego to act like they are certain and hide from the fact that they aren't certain. But then, if you're being
Right.
authentic and true to radical honesty, um, wouldn't that come across as lacking certainty, lacking conviction, um, being confused, not knowing until you know, but that can take many, many, many years, whereby You
Well, it
might
might
not
at the
be as
start, but if you keep doing that, you're going to get to a state where you've resolved so much in yourself that someone can come to you and they're gonna know when you speak that you know what you're talking about.
I see.
So you kind of earn it. You earn the certainty because you've
Right,
seen
right.
in your own life how if you prove something's true, like if you take a principle and you test it out and it works, you have the certainty because you've seen it. Like you've seen it. It's one thing to read about it, like this person tried this, but when you actually do it and you see it working again and again, like you can do it. Like if you're doing it with the Sedona method, you're going to see more emotions you let go of. You'll see how your life changes, the external and the internal, and that's going to give you the certainty. But yeah, at the start, it might be a step forward to not put on a front and pretend you know, because like yeah, you can if you really if you look for it, you can find there are motivational speakers with like hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and they don't know what they're talking about. Like you actually pay attention to what they're saying, you kind of see, and they're inconsistent. They don't have a solid worldview, and they're not
Yeah.
doing what they say. Like you can pick that up.
Hmm. Yeah. Um. Now, a counter argument to what you said before, whereby let's say you do Sedona and or you practice letting go, you practice these things, and um, then you gain a bit more certainty after a few iterations of practice and some insight. Um, and I'm sure you can in like a spiritual context, but there's still there's still an aspect of you that has to have a sample size, and that sample size needs to be sufficiently large enough whereby you can say, okay, now I'm certain or now I'm not certain. Who or how do you decide that sample size? How do you decide how much information you need to gain that certainty? How do you know if you are in a state of questioning something? How do you know it? For example, even if you say, oh, I can feel it now, what if you deconstruct feeling and then you notice those are just sensations? So, how is there a knowing about something if at the ultimate level it's kind of a fabrication? Do
But
you
that's
know what I'm
mixing
trying to
levels.
ask?
Like you can, yeah. If you go to a restaurant and the meal's nice, you know it was nice for you. You can say that's true for you. That was a nice meal. And I mean, you could come in and use, Ramana Maharshi and say, but what is taste? What is sensation? That's
Yeah.
that's mixing levels. If you're not there yet, um, just be honest to where you are now.
Okay. So,
Like if you're someone like you do the Sedona method, or it could be anything. Like say you have an anger problem, you've had it for years, and you really go at it, with counseling, therapy, and you resolve it. And now that's gone. Like that's valuable. Anyone now you can help anyone who's had that, anyone who has anger issues, because you've proved yourself you can do it. And people are going to seek you out. If someone's got an anger problem, they're going to come to you and they're going to know because you know it's worked. When they hear you speak, they know you're telling the truth. It can be very effective.
yeah, yeah, I know what you're trying to say.
But yeah, Hawkins said you should hold all information as provisional, which means it's true for now, but I'm ready for something else to come in and overtake it. That's more true.
Okay. I actually really like how you put that, or at least how Hawkins put that. Um, and as you talked about with the eating food and then saying, oh, it's good, but then that's at a relative level. I think there's some truth to where you can speak with conviction or speak as if you know something or like something or something
We
is
just you
true.
just say what's
Where
true
it's
for you. And
true for you,
if
yes,
something
right.
if something's
Everything you're
yeah,
saying is true for you at a certain point, but it doesn't
you
mean
can't
it
avoid that. That's right. Yeah.
has to be absolutely true. Was at an absolute
Yeah, it's
level.
provisional. It's
How
true
do you know
now, but
anything?
2 years from now could be a 180. Who knows?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's an really interesting thing to think about. I think um, I haven't really heard it being discussed too much before either. So I'm keen to investigate into
There's a
that more.
chapter in it's one of Hawkins' books. It's called Reality, Spirituality, and the Modern Man. There's two chapters in that book. One is called I think it's like reason, and it's got the word reason in it, and there's one called faith, and it's like a brilliant breakdown on what that is. Like from a metaphysical standpoint, it's such a like elaborate like construction of that. It makes it really clear.
Yeah, right. Like what is faith, you know? Um,
Well, like what it is you have to have faith in something. Like if you're someone who's a scientist, you have faith in the scientist, right? When a scientist says, um, the cloud is caused by moisture coming up from the ground, whatever the science behind that is, you don't know. You haven't read it. You haven't spent your life studying it. You're taking it on faith that what he said is true. And he's taking it on faith that what the other person said is true. So you can't avoid that conundrum. It's
yeah,
what you have faith in. An atheist has faith in his mind. His faith in his senses.
right. And
It's
somebody
unavoidable.
else in spirituality might have faith in beingness or the universe, enlightenment, God, things like that.
We have faith in whatever it is. If it's the Bible, if it's Ramana Maharshi, whatever book you're reading, and then you prove that it's true. So you hold it in mind and you test it out. And when you test it out, if you see that it's coming true, then you do it some more. And then if you see that's working, you do it even more. And you kind of see for yourself. That's the only way you can know.
That was a
But
great
you can't
analogy.
accept the fact that when you start off, you're not going to know if it's true or not.
And to
I mean,
add to
someone can
this,
say, read about it.
to add to this, because let's say you find out something and you know that thing, and you have like 100 experiences, 1,000 experiences. Um, but the crazy thing is, even then, it's still knowing at a relative level. And what I mean by this is, what if you
That's right.
lived? What if you lived in North America? In North America, there's only white swans. So you lived up there. You lived there your entire life. You wrote a million scientific papers on swans. And your conclusion is every swan is white. There exists no
Yeah.
other swan of any other color. Then one day you fly over to Perth, Australia, and then you come over to New Zealand and you find black swans. And you are like, what the hell? My worldview is crushed. Before I could
Yeah.
only find white swans, now I can only find black swans. Um, and so even I think with this consciousness stuff, uh, and then maybe this is just my limited perspective right now, but even talking about it from, and I'm talking about it from a very logical perspective, but um, I wonder if even when you know the final of the absolute, um, from an objective standpoint, you are only knowing that, but even then, I wonder if you actually know that's true, because what if there is, as that white swan and black swan analogy goes, maybe there's something you haven't even discovered. Um, what are your thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
Well, like on the scale of consciousness, it caps out at 1,000. That's the human domain. When you're a body, that's the highest world you can have. And they had archangels, and archangels at 50,000.
Wow.
And it's a what's the word I'm looking for? It's the type of graph that starts off on a slow incline, and as the graph goes along, it gets steeper and steeper. It's like that. So like the difference between 1 point and 40 is like the difference between 51 and 51.1. Like the higher the number gets, the steeper it gets. So I mean, it's really infinite. Like grow infinitely.
Yeah, I guess we as
That's
humans,
what all
we can't
the
we can't
spiritual
fathom a lot of these things,
yeah.
eh? Yeah.
Well, all the spiritual teachers say they basically say you're a son of God. Your potential is infinite. I mean, to think about that is staggering. It also means in the opposite direction. Like Panzram, that's the part that's terrifying to think about. That's just Jack's for opus. It can get far worse. I dread to think of what Panzram's destiny is when he dies. Someone who's done that. Oh man.
Mm,
Not going to be a fun time. But
no.
it's important to, it's really important that what you're focusing on is at least not going to harm anyone. I mean, that's just starters, and there's, something that's going to help people. That's so important to
Definitely.
get right.
Definitely.
What you're focusing on.
Yeah. Anyway, Callum, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm going to drop off now. I'm getting very fatigued. My sickness is fatiguing me. So I might have COVID for the third time, but who knows? I've already had it two
Yeah, it
other
was a
times. So
enjoyed.
um, it was definitely a lot worse those times. So this time it's just a bit fatiguing. And yeah. Sorry, what were you saying?
Yeah, I enjoyed conversation. It was a great conversation.
Thank you for coming on the show.